The Free Thinker Show. Ignite your mind, challenge the norm.
All right, ready to dive into some FBI secrets?
Always.
I've got a mountain of declassified files, interrogation manuals, and wild stories about everything from the Mafia to UFOs.
Comes right up our alley.
Let's get into it then. First up, interrogation techniques. Who hasn't seen that classic good cop, bad cop routine in a movie?
Oh, absolutely. The yelling, the threats.
Yeah.
Pure Hollywood, right?
You'd think that's how real FBI interrogations go down, but not so much.
Not at all. The real experts, the former agents we learned about, they say it's about building rapport, understanding the suspect's motivations.
It's more about psychology than intimidation, which is fascinating to me.
It makes sense, though, doesn't it?
Yeah.
The more an FBI agent knows about the suspect, about the situation, the more credible they become. And that's when the walls start to crumble.
Makes you think twice about those lie to get what you want scenarios, right?
Huge no-no in the FBI playbook.
Yeah.
You know, one source mentioned this analogy, and it really stuck with me. Imagine you're at work, and you know your coworker swiped your sandwich.
Classic office crime.
Right. But instead of confronting them directly, you tell them you've got security footage.
Busted.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Instantly, any trust is gone. They know you're lying, and the chances of them coming clean, zero.
Honesty, even when it's tough, it really is the best policy.
Absolutely. Speaking of tough, how about we jump into some declassified FBI files? I think this case might be my favorite so far. Silas M. Newton, an oil tycoon, claimed he invented this device that could detect oil deposits underground.
Already sounds a little fishy.
Right. And the FBI thought the same thing. Turned out, Mr. Newton was running a scam, trying to trick investors.
Okay, but what does this have to do with interrogation?
Here's the kicker. Mr. Newton, in addition to his oil detecting claims, also spun tales about encountering flying saucers on his property.
Wait, hold on. UFOs.
You heard right. And get this, the FBI actually thought about using this against him, like leaking information that suggested his device was actually based on alien technology, reverse engineered and all that.
Seriously, they're going to spread disinformation like that.
It was a wild idea for sure. Thankfully, cooler heads prevailed. The higher-ups realized that spreading such a crazy story, well, it could backfire, especially if the FBI's involvement ever got out.
Truth is stranger than fiction, right? This story takes the cake.
It does make you wonder what other secrets are hidden in those government archives, doesn't it?
Absolutely. But for now, maybe we should shift gears a bit. How about we dive into the world of organized crime? The Mafia, to be precise.
Now we're talking. The Mafia. Notorious for their code of silence and those shadowy initiation rituals, right?
It's like a peek into a hidden world. We actually found some first-hand accounts from former Mafia members, which was incredible.
The details they shared. One former member, went by the name Joy, described his initiation ceremony back in the 1960s. They presented him with 3 symbolic objects: a glass of wine, a gun, and a knife.
Talk about symbolism. What did it all mean?
Each object had a deep meaning. The wine, it represented the blood that bound them as a family. The gun, well, that was their willingness to use violence, obviously. And the knife, that symbolized their willingness to die for the family.
Loyalty, violence, and the constant threat of death. A potent combination for sure. It does make you wonder how much of that making your bones stuff we see in movies is true.
Ah, the million-dollar question. Is killing someone actually a requirement to become a made man in the Mafia?
So, what's the truth? Spill the beans.
Historically speaking, no doubt about it. In some circles, committing a contract killing, that was the rite of passage, proof of loyalty. Weeding out any undercover agents, too. But nowadays, things are different, more complex.
So the Mafia's gone soft.
Not exactly. It's more about risk versus reward. Ordering a hit for every new recruit, that's messy, dangerous. And think about it from the recruit's perspective. Why risk a murder charge when there's a cushy life of white-collar crime on the table?
Pragmatic. They've adapted with the times.
Exactly. Survival depends on it. And it highlights something crucial about the Mafia they value: order, control. This next guy's story, Mad Sam DeStefano, really drives that point home.
All right, hit me. Who is Mad Sam?
This guy, Mad Sam, he was a feared enforcer for the Chicago outfit, known for his brutality, his unpredictable behavior.
Sounds like made man material to me.
Right. Here's the twist. They never actually let him become a made man.
Wait, why not? Too good at his job.
The opposite, actually. He was too unpredictable, even for the mob. They couldn't control him. Remember, the Mafia, for all its ruthlessness, thrives on order, on reliability.
It's not just about being brutal. It's about being a reliable part of the machine.
Precisely. And that brings us to another cornerstone of the Mafia, the code of silence, omerta.
For decades, nobody talked. The threat of retaliation, it was enough to keep even the toughest gangsters quiet.
But even omerta, it's been tested lately. We see more and more mobsters turning state's witness.
Facing years, maybe even a lifetime, behind bars. I can see why some would choose self-preservation over loyalty.
Makes you wonder, what happens to an organization built on silence when its members start singing?
A fascinating question, and maybe one we revisit in another deep dive.
Agreed. But speaking of secrets, remember that whole Silas Newton UFO story? Turns out that wasn't the FBI's only brush with UFO sightings. This next story, it'll take us right back to the Cold War.
All right, set the stage.
Picture this. 1952, Cold War paranoia is at an all-time high. The U.S. is heavily reliant on uranium from mines in the Belgian Congo for its nuclear program.
So naturally, the CIA is on edge, watching for any hint of Soviet activity.
Right, but what they got was far stranger. Multiple witnesses on the ground reported seeing two unidentified flying objects described as disks flying over the uranium mine.
Wait, multiple witnesses. This is getting interesting.
And it gets better. They scrambled a Belgian military pilot, Commander Pierre, to intercept these UFOs. He got within 400 feet of one of them.
He saw it up close. What did he say it looked like?
According to his report, the object was huge, shaped like a discus, with a stationary inner core and this rapidly spinning outer ring, like something straight out of science fiction.
Did the CIA ever figure out what these things were?
That's the million-dollar question. While the CIA document called Commander Pierre's encounter credible, their conclusions about the origin of these objects, well, those are still classified.
Some secrets are just too big to reveal, I guess.
Maybe. But it makes you wonder what other unexplained phenomena might be buried deep within those government archives.
Speaking of things that might be buried, let's talk about the FBI's massive databases. Didn't we read something about how they might contain information on everyday citizens, people like you and me?
Exactly. Remember that fingerprint database? Millions of prints. Even from people who've never even had a parking ticket.
It came from job applications, background checks, things like that, right?
Exactly. Your prints could very well be in there.
I never even thought about that. But doesn't the FBI need a warrant to access personal information like that?
They're supposed to, especially for targeted surveillance. But there are loopholes, exceptions. National security is a big one.
So they can collect information on people who aren't even suspected of a crime. That's a little unsettling.
It's a tricky issue for sure. How do you balance security and personal freedom? Civil liberties groups argue that this kind of mass surveillance could be used to target individuals based on their beliefs, their affiliations.
Definitely a fine line to walk. But even if you've never been investigated by the FBI, could your information still end up in their hands?
Potentially, through something called parallel construction. Imagine this. The FBI gets evidence through shady means, maybe even an illegal search. But they hide that, cover their tracks, and create what looks like a legal chain of evidence.
So they make it look like they got the information by the book even though they didn't?
Exactly. And because it's all done in secret, it's almost impossible to detect or challenge.
That's a chilling thought. It makes you wonder what other information is out there and how it's being used. But let's shift gears for a moment and talk about something a little more concrete, cybercrime. How does the FBI even begin to track down criminals who operate online in the darkest corners of the internet?
It's like trying to catch smoke, right? But the FBI has had some remarkable wins infiltrating the very platforms these criminals use, setting digital traps to catch them red-handed.
You mean like going undercover online?
Precisely. One of their most successful operations was called Operation Trojan Shield. The FBI took control of this company, Phantom Secure, which provided encrypted phones.
The criminals' preferred method of communication.
Exactly. The FBI, they were running the company, intercepting messages, tracking movements, gathering evidence.
A digital sting operation?
Yeah,
Genius.
it was a major blow. They arrested over 800 criminals worldwide. But that's not all. The FBI also uses facial recognition databases, driver's license photos, passport applications, even images collected by private companies.
Hold on. Private companies are sharing facial recognition data with the FBI.
It's more common than you might think, and legal in many places.
So even if you tried to disappear, ditch your phone, your face could still betray you.
It's definitely possible. But the FBI still relies on more traditional methods too, like good old-fashioned human intelligence. Informants.
Like something out of a spy movie, planting moles within criminal organizations to get the inside scoop.
Exactly. And it's not just organized crime either. The FBI has used informants to infiltrate political groups, religious organizations, You name it.
What would make someone agree to become an informant?
All sorts of reasons. Money, a lighter sentence, maybe even a desire to take down a group they believe is dangerous.
Not always about being a criminal, then. Sometimes it's about ideology, a sense of justice, even.
Exactly. But it's a risky game. Being outed as an informant can get you killed.
A stark reminder that the world of espionage, it's rarely black and white. The lines between right and wrong, justice and revenge, they can get awful blurry.
They certainly can. And speaking of blurry lines, let's dive into one of the most infamous unsolved mysteries of all time. The case of the Zodiac Killer. Chilling, isn't it? The Zodiac Killer. Even decades later, that name sends shivers down your spine. Unsolved murders, cryptic messages, taunting the police. This case has it all.
Like something out of a nightmare, right? A faceless terror preying on innocent people. And after all this time, we still don't know who the Zodiac was. Just for those who might not know the details, can you give us a quick rundown?
Sure. Between 1968 and 1969, Northern California, the Zodiac Killer terrorized the area, claiming responsibility for at least 5 murders, 2 attempted murders. He loved sending letters to the newspapers, bragging about his crimes and daring the police to catch him.
And not just letters, right? Those ciphers he sent, it was like he was playing a twisted game with the entire Bay Area.
Absolutely. Those ciphers, they were incredibly complex. Even the most experienced code breakers were stumped. But get this, recently, there's been a huge breakthrough.
Don't tell me they finally cracked one.
They did. A team of code breakers, an Australian mathematician, an American software developer, they finally cracked the 340 cipher.
The one that's been unsolved for over 50 years. Incredible. What did it say?
Chilling stuff. Taunts, boasts about his crimes, and then this bizarre claim that he believed his victims would become his slaves in the afterlife.
Oh, I remember reading about that. Didn't he also say something like, killing is more fun than killing wild game in the forest? That line always stuck with me.
Disturbing, isn't it? Gives you a glimpse into the mind of a killer. But the deciphered message, it also revealed some interesting details. Like, the Zodiac specifically denies being the guy who called into that local TV show, claiming to be him.
You mean the Jim Dunbar show back in '69?
That's the one. So according to the deciphered message, that caller was a fake. The Zodiac, he was meticulous about his communications. It seems unlikely he'd let someone else speak for him. Makes you wonder how many other details in the case might be based on bad information, you know?
That is a chilling thought. But even with this new information, the Zodiac's identity, it's still a mystery.
It is. And there are other ciphers out there, still unsolved. The My Name Is cipher, sent in 1969, cracking that one. That could be the key to finally solving this case.
Hopefully, with all the advances in technology, someone will be able to unlock those secrets someday. But for now, the Zodiac Killer. He remains one of history's most elusive and fascinating mysteries.
A chilling reminder that some secrets just won't stay buried, and some mysteries might never be fully solved.
On that note, maybe we should lighten the mood a bit, explore a different kind of mystery, one where we actually have some answers. Let's talk about Joe Pistone, the FBI agent who went undercover as Donnie Brasco and infiltrated the Mafia.
Donnie Brasco.
Yeah.
Talk about a classic tale. Courage, deception, the blurred lines between right and wrong.
Exactly, the kind of story that makes you question everything you thought you knew about the FBI. To set the scene for us, can you take us back to the beginning?
Let's go back to the 1970s, the gritty streets of New York City. The 5 families, they had a stranglehold on the city, the criminal underworld. Truck hijackings were happening left and right, costing businesses millions.
And the FBI needed a way to break through that infamous Mafia code of silence.
Exactly. That's where Joe Pistone comes in. A seasoned FBI agent with a unique set of skills. He spoke fluent Italian, had a deep understanding of organized crime, and he had Sicilian heritage. He was the perfect guy for the job.
He was born to go undercover.
Yeah.
So he transforms himself into Donnie Brasco. What was his cover story?
Donnie Brasco, small-time jewel thief, a convincing, wise guy who could navigate the dangerous world of the mob.
And he pulled it off for 6 years. 6 years of living a double life, never knowing who to trust. I can't even imagine the pressure, the toll it must have taken.
Undercover work,
Yeah.
mentally and emotionally, it's brutal. But Pistone, he was dedicated, laser-focused. He knew the risks, but he also knew the information he was gathering. It could take down an empire.
Which it did. His work, it led to over 200 indictments, more than 100 convictions. That's a huge blow to the Mafia's operations in New York.
Huge. A major turning point in the fight against organized crime. But Pistone's success, it came at a steep price. When his cover was blown, the Mafia put a $500,000 contract out on him.
$500,000? That's insane.
That's how dangerous his work was. Pistone had to go into witness protection. New identity, living in hiding.
It's ironic, right? He dedicated his life to bringing down the Mafia, and then he ends up having to live like one of them, always looking over his shoulder.
It just goes to show you the sacrifices these undercover agents make. But Pistone's story, it also highlights how important human intelligence is, especially in the fight against organized crime. Sometimes it's not about guns and badges, it's about using your wit, your charm. A believable story.
Sometimes truth is stranger than fiction. And the most unbelievable stories are the ones that actually happened.
Speaking of unbelievable stories, this next one takes us from New York to a small town in Texas, where a horrific crime shook the nation. The 1983 murders of 5 employees at a Kentucky Fried Chicken in Kilgore, Texas.
The KFC murders, right. Haunted investigators for decades. What makes this case so puzzling, so enduring, even after all these years?
It's a case filled with twists, turns, dead ends. Even with all the leads, the false confessions, the evidence, we still have more questions than answers. Even today, we're not entirely sure who's responsible for this awful act.
It's a stark reminder that even the most ordinary places can become crime scenes. In some cases, no matter how hard we try, they might never be fully closed.
Let's start at the beginning. Friday night, September 23rd, 1983. Employees at the KFC on Highway 31, they're getting ready to close up shop, looking forward to the weekend, but then everything goes wrong.
Robbery.
Robbery, yes, but not the usual kind. There was no sign of a struggle. The employees, they just vanished, along with a small amount of cash from the register.
Like they just disappeared? What did the investigators think happened?
At first, they thought maybe the employees had been taken hostage, but that theory fell apart quickly. The next day, their bodies were found in a remote oil field about 15 miles outside of Kilgore.
That's awful. What did the crime scene look like?
It was grim. All 5 victims, Opie Hughes, the cook, Mary Tyler, the assistant manager, David Maxwell, Joey Johnson, and Monty Landers. They were all found face down, hands bound, each one-shot execution style.
That's not a robbery gone wrong. That's a professional hit.
That's exactly what investigators thought at first. The precision of the killings, the remote location, no sign of a struggle back at the restaurant, everything pointed to a planned, calculated crime.
So if it was a hit, who wanted these 5 people dead, and why?
Those questions have haunted investigators for years. The motive behind the KFC murders remains a mystery.
So brutal crime scene, no clear motive, and no real suspects. What did investigators do?
Well, they started by looking for any connection between the victims, something in their past, their relationships, anything that might give them a lead, but they came up empty. These were just ordinary people, well-liked, no obvious ties to any criminal activity.
A real head-scratcher.
It was. But they did have one piece of the puzzle. A single fingerprint. Partial, but still a fingerprint. They found it on a napkin at the crime scene.
That could be huge. A single fingerprint can crack a case wide open, but you said partial. Must have been tough to find a match.
It was. And back then, fingerprint technology, it wasn't what it is today. They ran the print through their databases, but nothing came back. The case went cold. For years, the families of those victims, they had no answers, just agonizing questions.
So what changed? How'd they finally catch a break?
Remember we talked about investigators looking into that local methamphetamine ring?
Right, because meth and violence, they often go hand in hand. And the brutality of those KFC murders, it seemed to fit the pattern.
Exactly. Well, years later, a man named James Earl Mankins Jr., he gets arrested in connection with that meth ring. And get this, Mankins, he was missing part of a finger.
You're kidding. His missing finger, it matched the partial print from the KFC murders.
That's what investigators thought at the time. Plus, Mankins sort of matched the description of one of the suspects seen near the KFC that night. Enough to get him indicted for the murders.
Wow. Talk about a case of mistaken identity.
That's what it seemed like. Mankins always said he was innocent. He had an alibi for the night of the murders, and eventually they took another look at the fingerprint. Turns out, it wasn't a match after all.
They got it wrong.
They did. Charges against Mankins were dropped in 1995. But by then, he'd already spent years in prison for a crime he didn't commit.
A tragic reminder that even with the best intentions, the justice system, it can fail. But if Mankins wasn't involved, who are the real killers?
That's where DNA technology comes in. Years later, investigators, they decided to take another look at that fingerprint, the one from the crime scene. DNA analysis had come a long way. They thought maybe, just maybe, they could get a usable sample from it.
That's a long shot, isn't it? Getting DNA from a fingerprint, especially one that old.
It was a long shot, no doubt, but they had to try. And guess what? They were able to extract a DNA profile from that fingerprint, ran it through CODIS, the national DNA database, and boom, they got a hit.
They found a match. Who was it?
2 names came back: Romeo Pinkerton and Darnell Hartsfield. Remember, they'd been on the suspect list early on, but they were ruled out. Hartsfield, he supposedly had an alibi.
But he didn't.
Nope. Turned out Hartsfield had been released from jail, get this, just 2 days before the KFC murders. Investigators had the wrong date, dismissed a key suspect because of it.
Wow, what a mistake.
A costly one, for sure. But with that DNA match, they finally had enough to charge Pinkerton and Hartsfield.
Decades later, they finally got their guys. Case closed.
You'd think so, right? But there's a twist. Remember how the evidence pointed to 3 people being involved?
Right, but they only ever caught 2.
Exactly. To this day, we still don't know who the 3rd person was. Maybe they were never even identified in the first place. It's a haunting reminder that even with convictions, some cases are never truly closed.
A loose thread in the story, going all the way back to that night in 1983.
It certainly adds another layer to this whole thing. And speaking of layers, let's shift gears a bit. Leave the world of fast food and unsolved murders and step into the world of celebrity, scandal, and J. Edgar Hoover's FBI. We're talking about Hugh Hefner, the man behind Playboy magazine, and his associate, Bobby Arnstein.
The Playboy mansion, huh? Glamour, parties, and more than a few secrets, I'm sure. What was the FBI's interest in Hugh Hefner?
Hefner, he was a controversial figure, to say the least. His views on social issues, his advocacy for sexual liberation, his association with all those counterculture figures. Let's just say he was on J. Edgar Hoover's radar.
Hoover, with his conservative values, I bet he saw Hefner as a direct threat. But it wasn't just Hefner's personal life, right? Wasn't the FBI also looking into his business dealings?
You bet. And the woman at the center of it all, Bobby Arnstein, Hefner's close confidant, a major player in the Playboy empire. She wasn't just a socialite. She managed finances, negotiated deals, helped Hefner navigate legal challenges.
His right hand, but also, as you said, a target of the FBI.
That's right. They suspected her of being involved in some of Hefner's shadier business dealings, specifically drug trafficking. The Playboy Mansion back then was known for its wild parties, fueled by more than just champagne, if you know what I mean.
So the FBI figured if they could flip Arnstein, get her to talk, they'd have enough to take down Hefner.
It seems that way. They put the pressure on, hoping she'd crack. But Arnstein, she was loyal to Hefner, always denied any wrongdoing, refused to cooperate.
A decision that would cost her dearly.
Tragically so. In 1975, they arrested Arnstein on drug trafficking charges. She swore she was innocent, but the jury didn't buy it. 15 years, that's what she got. But while she was out on bail appealing the verdict, they found her dead in a hotel room.
She took her own life.
Officially, yes. Drug overdose. She left a note, though, proclaiming her innocence, accusing the government of persecuting her and Hefner.
A tragic end to a complicated story. Makes you think about the pressure she must have been under, the lengths the FBI might have gone to get what they wanted.
Her death, it changed everything. Suddenly, the Playboy empire, it didn't seem so glamorous anymore. Hefner always believed Arnstein was innocent, a casualty in Hoover's vendetta against him.
A story full of intrigue, but also a reminder that the price of fame can be steep.
No doubt about it. And it makes you question, where's the line between loyalty and complicity? What secrets are worth protecting, and at what cost?
We've covered a lot of ground today. From the intricacies of FBI interrogations to the dark underbelly of Hollywood, from the brutal realities of organized crime to the enduring allure of unsolved mysteries, it's clear that truth can be stranger than fiction.
Absolutely. And as we wrap up this deep dive into the secretive world of the FBI, I think the biggest takeaway is this. Never stop asking questions. Never stop digging for the truth, even when it's buried under layers of secrecy and deception.
Because the more we learn, the more we understand about the world around us, the forces that shape our lives, and sometimes even ourselves. So until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and we'll see you on the next deep dive.